Welcome to Woke Wednesdays. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. We got a comment. Oh, Christine, one of my high school classmates.
Oh shit.
Just commented saying hi.
Hello, Christine.
Love what you're doing. Miss you too, Christine. Miss you too. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. Tonight we have an amazing guest on the show. We're gonna address, I think, a really important topic that should probably be addressed more often. And so, would you like to introduce yourself, tell the people who you are, what you do?
Shit, yeah, we'll do the whole thing. I'm Justin Taylor, currently a second-year master's student in the Higher Education Administration program, though I live in this weird sort of dual life where I actually spend most of my time taking classes with Herson and other doctoral students. You want to do the whole...
Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. A little bit of background about myself. I graduated with a mathematics degree at Northern Kentucky University. I'm from Kentucky, grew up there, went to high school there, the whole bit. Graduated, actually took a few years off before I went to graduate school.
How many years?
About 2.5.
2.5.
Worked for a year as a consultant for my service fraternity. Shout out Alpha Phi Omega.
There you go.
And yeah. And then was just like unemployed for a little bit, trying to figure out my life. Worked part-time for a while until I saved up enough money to come down here and go to graduate school, because I just finally was just like, all right, time to do it, gotta go. I've always wanted to go to graduate school. That was always sort of gonna happen. It was just a matter of, when and getting there and what I was actually gonna study, stuff like that.
Gotcha. So you've said a lot, and we just started, and we're gonna unpack all of
Blew
this.
right through all of that.
So if you've never tuned into Woke Wednesdays, feel free to drop questions, comments, whatever is kind of concern to you. We're here to try to answer all your questions. Justin has great insight into tonight's topic. So, couple things. You said that you took about 2.5 years off from undergrad to graduate school, and you were a mathematics major.
Yes.
And now you're doing a master's in higher education.
Yes.
So what led you, number one, to pick a higher education administration program, and number two, why move from Kentucky to go to school in Miami, Florida?
Okay. All right. Well, I'll start with the first one, because even that's sort of a long, sort of circuitous tale. So. In undergrad, I was mathematics and computer science, with more of an emphasis in mathematics. And around, I guess would have been like my junior year, end of junior year, beginning of senior, I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to graduate school for mathematics. I wanted to go like faculty route, research, all of that, because that was always sort of I always wanted to be a professor. It was kind of just figuring out the field and going from there. And I was good at mathematics. I liked mathematics. The thing I realized was, for both of those fields, math and computer science, I wasn't interested in getting a PhD in it, if that makes sense. Like I would have been, I was really good at teaching it. I would have enjoyed teaching it, and so I wanted to do that. And I liked the college atmosphere, and so I knew that's what, versus like high school, something like that.
So you knew this prior to graduating from undergrad, or
Yes.
after you graduated?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even kind of early on going into undergrad, I kind of always had a sense that I wanted to end up at a university.
You were a first-gen student?
First-gen student, yes. No one in my family had ever even really considered going to college. And then randomly I came along, and it was always kind of early on, I was just always interested in academics. I wanted to go into mathematics. And we can talk about, we can talk more about these particular tests in a minute, but I took the GRE, just standardized test to get into graduate school, kind of in the vein of an ACT, SAT. And then if you're going into certain fields, there are subject GREs. So I took the mathematics GRE. So if you want to go to a grad program of mathematics, this is sort of on top of the GRE, you also have to take this other exam.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so I took the GRE first, I thought very well on that. And then I took the mathematics GRE, and that was, let's say, not my best day. It was not my best day at all. Which is what a lot of my faculty always told me too. They were like, every time you ask them about it, they're like, look, I was having a rough day. I was hungover.
Math tests are low, by the way.
Matt? Hi, Matt.
Matt's one of our other classmates.
Matt. So yeah, not my best day. And the more I started, so like senior year, we did what's called a Capstone Project. It's sort of just a culminating sort of research thing. And I did not enjoy doing it. And I was like, I can't do this for the next like 5, 6, 7 years of my life. So I started scrambling around trying to figure out what other graduate program I was going to go into. For about a semester, I was actually going to go into a Master's of English in Literary Analysis.
That sounds horrible.
I was excited about it. That I actually admitted to my undergrad's master's program, was conditionally admitted pending graduation from undergrad.
At Kentucky.
At Northern Kentucky, yes. But then I was offered the consultant position and decided to pursue that instead of graduate school, just because it was a good opportunity. It was travel, and I liked the idea of going into this English program, but I knew in my heart of hearts, like, that's probably not what I really needed to be doing. So I did the consultant job, and through that, traveled around, visited a whole bunch of universities, working with, for those who aren't familiar with consultants and how they work, basically I worked for the fraternity, and my job was to visit somewhere in the neighborhood about 23 chapters throughout the course of the semester.
Whoa,
and yeah, it was brutal. But you visit them, you work with them, you help, whether it's recruitment or programming, developmental kind of stuff, things like that, checking in, making sure paperwork and shit's good. And so I did that night, and while I would visit these universities, we would always set up meetings with like appropriate student affairs professionals, so like heads of campus life, heads of student engagement. It was a community service-based fraternity, so if they had like a Center for Leadership and Service or some equivalent office, we'd meet with them. And just in meeting with these professionals, I was just like, this is awesome. Like, it's not so much I want to do this consultant thing anymore. I want your job. And so that sort of led me towards the higher education administration track.
Patrick just said he is legit spelling out my next 5 years. Talk about you.
Yeah, that's it. The consultant, if you're in a fraternity and you're considering a route sort of like working in these routes, consultant positions are fantastic. It's also great for networking. Little insight on there. And it, pays well. Well, yeah, pays.
It pays.
It pays. You get a paycheck.
There you go.
So yeah.
Oh, Ami says hello too.
Oh my god, Ami checking in.
The whole class is on.
There we go. So yeah. I wanted to go into a higher education program. So the other part of that was how I specifically got into Miami. And that was sort of a person. So when I first started applying, I was looking at schools just all over. I mean, I pulled up a list of, and and for most kind of fields, you can search this. I did this for higher ed administration, but you can do it for just about anything. And it's just master's programs in blank field. And so I searched higher education, took me to a couple websites, and found a list of like 100 programs or something around that in the country. And so so I'm just scrolling through the list, and when you have a list of 100 schools in front of you that you are potentially going to apply to, but obviously you can't apply to all 100, you have to start making decisions based on things that are probably that important. So like, that's in the middle of nowhere, don't want to live there. That's out on the West Coast. I don't really care about the West Coast. I'm not going to go live there. This is, this and this and this. And then some of it is, I knew a couple people who were studying in this field already that I'd gone to undergrad with. They were in my fraternity, and so I asked them if they had some recommendations. Not as much came out of those, but I ended up applying. I somehow narrowed it down to like Kansas State, I think, Ohio University up in Athens, Ohio.
Athens, Ohio?
Athens, Ohio. It's a small kind of mountain town in East Ohio. That is opposite from Miami as you could possibly get. And then FIU actually initially only got on my radar because person who's now my roommate, she was down here in law school. She started a year before I came down here. So it purely was just she knew I was looking around at schools, and I think she just searched to see if FIU had a program, saw they did, and then just started hard selling me. I think probably just because she wanted someone else to come down here and live in Miami with her. Miami is awesome, but she didn't have anyone. Well, she didn't have anyone from back home. She had friends.
She didn't have anyone.
That was...
And then you came along.
Let's pretend that's true. Now she has a whole bunch of friends, and I just sort of take care of the apartment while she's gone.
A house sitter.
She called me that the other day. Yeah, I'm a really good house sitter.
And you pay rent when you house sit.
And I pay half the rent. I'm really good at getting exploited. I'm really good at it.
You're a very giving house sitter.
A very giving house sitter, yeah.
I'll be saying, Heather, come through.
So when it came down, so I applied. I was accepted to Kansas State, Ohio, and here. Kansas State, I kind of quickly wrote off just because they were way out in the middle of Kansas, and I just wasn't interested in moving that far out. And so I was really kind of seriously looking at Ohio University in Miami, or Miami. That's really what I was. I was looking at Miami. I was looking at FIU, and when you apply to graduate programs and you get sort of initially accepted, they all kind of do this where you go out, you interview, meet the faculty, meet some of the other potential students. And we did interviews for graduate assistantships. And so one weekend I had Ohio, and then the next weekend I had FIUs. And so I went to Ohio.
You were interviewing for the program or interviewing for what?
So at Ohio, the way it worked was you interviewed for the program and you interviewed for your assistantship. And it was
What's an assistantship?
Graduate assistantship. So this is sort of it's a job that graduate students can get at the university doing some kind of service for the campus. So it's usually a little bit more just kind of basic level administrative stuff. There's usually dozens and dozens available, anywhere from like working in athletics to campus life to a dean's office, academic offices, things like that. And just sort of doing work for the university. And then the way they work is usually they give a pretty substantial, if not total, tuition waiver, so you don't have to pay tuition for your program. And then they give you a stipend to sort of get by on. It's usually not like enough to live on, but cover most of the expenses.
So are there other ways of paying for graduate school besides a graduate assistantship?
There are. That's kind of the most tried and true way, I would guess, and probably the way that the majority of people that are getting it funded do it. However,
because that also doesn't pay much, right?
It doesn't. Yeah, it
the
doesn't
graduate
pay much.
assistantship doesn't pay much. Yeah.
So if you are able to get a full-time job at the university, which is actually what I initially tried to do, but they tend to like you to already have certain credentials already. But if you can get a full-time position, usually full-time employees, as a part of their benefits, get X amount of hours just waived. They just don't have to pay it at all.
Yeah, that's what Alami's saying. Work for the university.
Yeah.
A different way. Yeah.
Usually they won't cover. So like we take 9 credit hours to be full-time. Usually schools only cover like 6 credit hours. So either if you want to be full-time, you have to pay some, or something. But it's a good way to do it, and your paycheck is a lot larger than what a grad assistant is.
Yeah. And there are also scholarships.
Scholarships. There's a lot of scholarships. So like my roommate's in law school. She got a scholarship to go to law school. In all programs, there are scholarships that are available.
Can grad students usually get grants, or like Pell Grants, like undergrad students?
Yes.
Or mostly loans?
You can get Pell Grants, especially Pell Grants. Definitely fill out your FAFSA. Do that exactly like you did in undergrad. Functions the exact same way. And you're eligible for those stuff. Even if you're in specific sort of professional fields, what we call them. So like a law program, a med program, they're sorted a little bit differently, but the same idea applies. You fill out the FAFSA, you can get federal grant funding. Scholarships are available. Usually they're not the same kind of scholarships that undergrads apply for, but there's usually something. The other thing that's worth noting, but depending on the field you're going into, you can usually also get it paid for by a company you work for. Usually this is real common in like the business sector especially. So if you're trying to go for like a master's business program or like an MBA, something like that, and you work especially at like larger sort of national, international companies, they might pay for your graduate schooling with conditions. You get this program, you go to this school, you take this many hours, all of that. They usually have a lot of control over it, but they'll sometimes pay for that as well.
I worked for T-Mobile when I first moved to Miami, and they were willing to pay for some of my schooling, like tuition reimbursement.
Yep.
But I would have to give them a year of my life For every year they pay for it, I have to give them a year.
Usually, there's some kind of deal like that. We'll pay for your schooling. You work for us for a few years after you're like committed, or you pay us back, something like that.
Yeah. So all right. So we covered there are different types of tests to get into graduate school, right?
Yep.
GRE. And there are other ones if you're going into business stuff, maybe GMAT. Law school, LSAT, med school, MCAT. You have to pay,
GRE,
right?
Stuff like that.
Most of the time to take the test, right? And we're gonna get into the other part a little bit later on about paying. So you end up applying to a master's program. You end up getting in.
Yeah.
All right. So when you looked at FIU here in Miami, it wasn't like, oh, it's a very. What were you thinking of? Most like your roommate that you were going to have, you're going to be able to connect with your friend again? Or what was it that finally led you to FIU? You said, this is a program for me. This is the city where I want to live.
So this, I sort of based it around the field a little bit, but what I was interested in was a graduate experience very, very different from all educational experiences I'd had up to that point. So I'm from kind of mid-sized suburban town in Kentucky. Went to a predominantly white institution in Northern Kentucky University, and then even some of the other schools that I was looking at, like when you got there, maybe the faculty had some diversity to it, but all of the other students were like Midwestern Kentucky, Ohio, Kansas, Anglo-white people. Just a whole other thing now. But I was interested in Miami and South Florida and Florida International University specifically because of the diversity around the institution and the diversity around the city, and I didn't want to be educated in the same kind of cultural environment that I had been. I was looking for a very different experience. It was kind of the things that normally give people culture shock when they move to Miami from, say, like Kentucky, so like language barrier, stuff like that. I was specifically looking for those experiences.
Quick question. Does every also master's program require GRE?
No. I would probably even go as far as to say a bunch of master's programs probably don't. If you're going into like a doctoral program, will, and so it's worth taking. The rule of thumb I was given on taking the GRE, or programs requiring the GRE was, if it's a more research-intensive kind of program, so writing a lot, reading a lot, expectations of maybe even getting published, or writing like a thesis or something, those usually require the GRE. If it's a program that isn't so geared towards producing academics and scholars and maybe people going on a faculty route, but people going more practitioner, tends to not care about the GRE as much. How true that is, I don't know. That was what I was given.
And sometimes also in undergrad programs, if you had like a 3.5, let's say, in your undergraduate program, they might also waive taking a GRE or a GMAT or whatever it is. Especially if you're going to the same school to get your master's as you did for your undergraduate.
Yeah, that was my undergrad's policy. If you got your bachelor's here and you're going to our graduate program, then they just waive the GRE. Because presumably they know the type of education you got.
And y'all, please feel free to ask questions about graduate school. Tonight's topic is graduate school, master's programs, PhD program. What's the purpose of it? What's the point of it? Who gets to go? Does everybody get to go? And that's kind of the next question I want to ask you. Who gets to go to graduate programs? And are there ways that people are kind of weeded out, or they're a type of bias against them? Have you experienced it? Tell us a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, there's a million answers to that question. The biggest thing, and we were kind of, I think, alluding to this a minute ago, but probably the biggest thing, more than anything, that will keep you out of going to graduate school is money. As expensive as college education, graduate education, whatever you hear about tuition payments and getting waived or not waived or whatever, all of that you can find funding for. The thing you cannot find funding for is getting into graduate school. So paying for the application to the school. If you do take the GRE and you have to get your source code, we were just talking about this a minute ago, it's like $27 just to have your scores sent to a school.
Yep. So if you apply to 3 schools, that's almost $90.
Yeah. And then, like I was saying earlier, for just about any kind of graduate program, you have to actually go out and interview. So you got to fly out to wherever they are. You have to maybe get a hotel if you don't have anyone nearby or anything like that. And so just the process of getting into graduate school is really, really expensive. But there are other things that I think limit it as well. So I don't really want to privilege specifically what lines this will get drawn on, because I think it happens in multiple. But so, for example, graduate schools require letters of recommendation, which means, and it sounds obvious, but I think sometimes we take it for granted, you have to then get a letter of recommendation from someone. So if you didn't have that staff member or that faculty or three of them that you connected with,
but three.
Then, what are you going to do?
If you're a shy student.
Yeah, if you're a shy student, maybe you're a good student, you take a lot of notes, you study really hard, you do great on the exams, and you never once had a conversation with your professor. And those are the things you don't even think about when you're like freshman, sophomore, junior, like I need to establish a relationship with this faculty member, so they write a letter. Ain't no one thinking about that. But you have to have someone write these letters of rec.
So before we get into more ways, because I'm sure we're going to discuss a lot of ways that people go through this, we have a couple questions being asked. I'm going to get to Ami's question in a bit because she has a really interesting question. Patrick is asking, what's the difference in the class/cohort size of the programs?
Okay, yeah.
He's specifically he wants to get into a student affairs program.
Okay, so those, I would say, master's programs you're going to have around, back like probably 30 to 40 is an average class size.
Depends on the school too.
Yeah, not counting, and that's probably mostly full-time students. Some schools, they're mostly part-time. So if it's like a 2-year program, there's probably anywhere from like 70 to 90 people in the program. Total, like for both years. For a student affairs-y kind of program. But some schools are much larger. So like, I think our law school, every year the graduating class is in the neighborhood of like 100 and something.
Oh, wow.
So you figure how many people are actually coming in and not, weeded out along the way. Med schools, probably somewhere comparable around that. MBA programs, some of those are even larger.
And MBA programs have really changed recently because they have like the weekend programs, the night programs, the accelerated program. They have all types of. So it really depends probably on the program, right?
Yeah. It depends on the field. Once you get to doctoral work, that gets usually much, much smaller. But in general, even when you're in like these larger master's classes, like you're talking about a class of, like when you're actually in a classroom taking a class, it's going to be like 20, 30 people max in the class, usually smaller. Yeah,
and doc classes can be extremely small. I've been in a class of 6 now,
7.
Right?
Yeah,
7.
we have 7 in this class.
All right, so Tara has another question. Do you ever regret taking the thesis route and being separated from the rest of the program?
Every day. So yes and no. The thesis. Okay, so this kind of brings up.
So what is the thesis?
And
what's the difference between that and dissertation?
So a thesis is in many ways just kind of a mini dissertation, and both of these are sort of a long, independent research project that you have to do. You have to come up with a study. Generally, when you're in a master's and doing a thesis, and maybe you have someone like Ben Baez that kind of generous and help you out on the topic a little bit. But generally, you have to come up with your own research project. You have to conduct the study, and then you have to write this kind of long. It's a long process. Usually takes around a year or more to write a thesis. Dissertations can take anywhere from a year, 2 years to
20 years.
Much longer for some people. Generally, they're supposed to be around like 2-3 years.
About how many pages would you say a thesis is? On average.
Yeah, on average, mine's going to probably end up, because of the nature of it, to be a little bit longer, but probably a good thesis is going to be around 40, 45 pages. Mine's going to get closer to 60, I think, because of it's a sort of weird one. Dissertations, most of the ones that I read get closer to like 100.
I've read one that's up to 300 words.
Yes, 300 pages.
So
it's hopefully a lot of that's charts and graphs and stuff like that. But yeah, basically you have to write a book when you're writing a dissertation.
Yeah.
So as far as regretting it, it's all in what.
Real quick before you continue.
Yeah.
Now she said you took the thesis route.
Yes.
So that means there could have been a non-thesis route. So can you kind of explain that? Because not all programs require a thesis.
And I would even venture to say that the vast majority of programs do not require a thesis, master's programs.
Education programs or just like other programs?
Vast majority of all fields. Usually, probably a lot of them have some middle ground, so maybe you have some sort of capstone you have to do, so like a 1 semester small mini research thing, or like a comprehensive exam, something like that. All, like if you're getting a PhD, any kind of doctorate, it's outside of maybe like med and law are different. They operate under different rules. But any other kind of doctorate, you have to write a dissertation. But for the thesis, that's generally pretty rare. So for example, in our program, I think Ben was done in the last like 10 years, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, I think like 5 people have written a thesis. So the vast majority of people don't do it, and the reason for that is what you're trying to get out of the program. A thesis is really, really, really valuable and useful if you're trying to go into a doctoral program.
Straight into one.
Yes, straight into one. So, which is what I would like to do. So I'm looking to go right into a doctoral program starting next fall. And the thesis is sort of the best. You have to, usually when you go into doctoral, you have to give a writing sample, and the thesis is kind of the best writing example you can give to a potential program, because it demonstrates your ability to do something like the dissertation.
Yep.
Because what doctoral programs do not want is to admit students, teach them for a few years, and then they flame out on the dissertation and don't actually complete it.
Most students, doc students, will finish their coursework.
Yep.
And then we'll get into what we mean by coursework. Yep. But will not finish. I think I heard a statistic about half won't finish the dissertation.
Yes. For tons of reasons. Personal reasons, family reasons, just got tired of it reasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to go that route. So the thesis is not mandatory, but man, it's going to make a big difference.
Yeah.
So
stand out.
Yeah, and so in that way, and it's a great experience, a great intellectual experience. So in that way, no, I don't regret it for anything.
Yeah.
But there are things that you give up. So we were talking about differences in sort of how you complete. So even within our original program, the vast majority of the people, they take 3 classes a semester for 4 semesters, maybe do like a summer internship in the middle there, and then they get their degree, and then they can kind of go get a kind of entry-level position that they want. I basically, for my first semester, I was taking classes with my peers. Second semester, 2 out of the 3 classes were kind of largely with my peers. One of them, I was already kind of taking some doctoral level work. And now I don't take classes with the rest of the
So what happens? Because this is something we were talking about before the show, that
yep.
you could have had a non-thesis, just master's experience with your master's classmates, and there would have been nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right?
Not at all.
But you decided to kind of take charge of your education.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because some students don't think that way, that they can take charge of their education. But you did. So can you kind of talk to us a little bit about that?
So yeah, I felt that I wasn't getting the education that was good for me and my goals. And that's very important. It wasn't that I was getting bad education. I wasn't getting an education that was, I thought, benefiting me specifically. And you can only do so much within a class to really do anything about that. I mean, you can write a better paper, I guess.
Yeah.
You can do some outside reading, but you generally, it's hard to sort of know what you're doing. And so I just started talking to faculty and kind of just expressing my frustrations a little bit. And generally, I've found that faculty are very open, amenable to, if you express, especially a sentiment like, I'm not learning what I want to be learning, I'm not being stimulated in this, I don't think it's helping my goals, please help.
Yeah.
Then they are super helpful for that. If it's just sort of the complaining, I just don't want to do this assignment, no one has time for that.
Yeah.
But I started expressing my fact that I wanted to. I didn't think they were rigorous enough. I didn't think the conversations were in the same kind of vein that I was wanting out of my classes, and I told faculty that every single professor I came across, I started telling this to. And I knew the thesis was an option, and I knew that I was interested already in doing one. So I had set up a meeting with the chair of our department to discuss that, and sort of through that conversation, he connected me with some other faculty in our program that I hadn't had, that I probably wouldn't have studied under, and just kind of recognizing my persistence and interest, because it wasn't just that I had one meeting with them and said, I want to write a thesis. I had to have like 2 or 3 meetings with them where I was like, no, I actually really want to do
Kind of
this.
like proving yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Because a lot of students will say their first semester they want to write a thesis. And then they are told what they have to do to write a thesis, and then nobody comes back. That's generally how it seems to work.
So real quick.
Yeah.
So you felt that there was something missing, and you wanted to take something more rigorous, something that maybe meant more. And so you did. You did it. You started asking questions.
Yeah.
Because I want folks to understand that if you feel like there's something missing out of your program,
Yes.
you can go look for it.
Yeah.
In my case, I looked for. I tried to do a thesis, but it didn't work out. So I did a graduate certificate.
Yep.
So it's kind of like a minor in undergrad, but
Yep.
so that's what kind of is in graduate school.
Yep.
So you can do graduate certificates at most schools in any type of field that you would like. So mine was 18 credits, and at the time our master's program was 36 credits. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's half a master's in a different area.
Yep.
So here we
year's
have
worth of classes.
Yeah, exactly. So there are different certificates that you can get here: women's studies, academic advising, different types of certificates that you can do at your school too. That's something you're interested in once you go into a or a master's program or doc program.
Yeah. And a lot of programs, they'll have, so like we have certain amount of elective credits where you can just take any graduate level courses, and though not widely advertised, they can, department heads especially can just swap classes out. So every program you go into, you take these courses.
A program of study. Right?
Program of study, yeah. But with permission, and maybe this policy kind of varies across institutions and departments, but generally speaking, department heads have the ability to, okay, this class isn't going to be beneficial for you, so I'm going to take that off of your program of study, and then we'll replace it with this other class that's more beneficial for you. Very rare, but if you're really passionate about it, usually you can find a good faculty to help you out.
And the same thing happens in doc programs. You can sometimes they call it a concentration, or I forgot the other word that it's used in doc.
Something area, contract area, concept area.
I forgot. I'll come back to you.
Like
but
that. One of the other doc students, help us out.
Yeah, right. So Tara wanted to know, what was your thesis topic again?
Thesis topic. So it is the title of it is A Philosophical Inquiry into the Role of Universities in American Democracy. So there's a lot of.
You say that one more time.
Yes. This is the one thing you'll find about theses and dissertations. They have very long titles because you have to write very specifically.
Yes.
So
very specifically.
it is a philosophical inquiry into the role of universities in American democracy. So philosophical inquiry is there's actually more than this, but for the sake of it, there's kind of 3 main ways you can do a study. A quantitative study, which is a very mathematical base. You're talking like survey research, things like that. Statistical analysis on data and trends and things. A qualitative, which is usually going to be very experiential. You do interviews, focus groups, and then you sort of do an analysis based on the information collected in those discussions. Or I'm doing, and it's generally not so commonly done, but I'm doing what's called a philosophical inquiry, which is much more, to sum it up, basically I read what a whole bunch of other people, and I mean a bunch of other people, have written on this topic, and then I sort of sum up what they had to say, offer my critique on what they had to say, and then kind of offer hopefully something new.
Type of literature review.
Yes, a lot of lit review, and like books. If you ever come into my apartment, I have just a stack of books. Much like most doc students do, just a stack of books that I'm just sort of slowly pushing my way through. And then I have to write something about it.
So, okay. So, awesome. I only want to know, how do you deal with difficult faculty? So, in your master's program, you didn't feel like you were getting what you wanted out of your master's program. So, you wanted something more rigorous. You necessarily did not know you wanted a doctoral experience.
Yeah,
right?
That was sort of new. But yeah. I wasn't getting an experience from the faculty that I wanted. So, that's tricky because finish the wine that was already in there. You're mixing my wines.
I'm sorry.
Malbec and
I'm a mixer. I'm sorry.
You're fine. I'm just hang on, sorry.
Oh, okay. That's how we do it on WokeWednesdays.
Difficult faculty. When you're dealing with faculty that are difficult, whether you're not getting the experience out of it that you want, maybe there's a personality conflict, or you just don't think academically they're providing what maybe they should be. So the discussions are not as deep as maybe you would like, the readings are not as complex or interesting as perhaps they should be, etc. There's a little bit you can do with faculty, but the real honest to God's truth is there is nobody more egotistical and narcissistic than faculty.
Speak on that.
That's just kind of make a bunch of jokes about it, but really I think it just comes from, if you're being really honest about it, what it's probably coming from is you've spent how many years, maybe decades, doing research in this field, working in this field. Maybe for a lot of programs now it's very common, maybe you haven't been like doing research a whole lot, but you're a practitioner in the field. And so you know some stuff. I mean, they legitimately are smart. You don't get to that position without generally being smart. But that doesn't always mean that they are intelligent in things that you're specifically looking for. They probably, because going back to what we were talking about, like to do a thesis, to write a dissertation, you become extraordinarily knowledgeable about a very specific thing. So like a vast majority of those studies are like, I studied this one population at this one institution during this 1 year.
You might be the smartest person in the country on that particular issue.
Yes, on that issue. But on all of the other issues, you're just like the rest of us.
And also, just because you are smart, and we can get into what intelligence means, that doesn't mean you necessarily know how to talk to people. Yeah. That doesn't mean you necessarily know how to empathize with students to understand where they come from.
It means you wrote something really smart. Has nothing to do with, I'm really good at conveying these complex thoughts and ideas to this group of people who I only kind of know a little bit about.
So, quick question, because I think this is interesting. We're bringing up I'm bringing up the idea of faculty. There are different types of faculty, right? There are some people who are administrators and become faculty, right?
Yeah, have what's called a courtesy appointment, usually.
Right. And then we have people who are adjuncts, who have like a part-time gig, maybe teach a class or two, who are extremely underpaid. Yep. But then you have people who are your tenured track professors. Real quick, what is tenure?
So tenure is kind of the holy grail if you're a faculty, usually at an institution. The way tenure track and becoming tenured works is usually for about 5-6 years or so. The faculty has they have what's called a 2-2 load. So they have to teach 2 classes a semester, and they have to, over the course of the year, I think it's usually you have to have 2 publications or something like that. Publications in scholarly journals, peer-reviewed kind of stuff. And you have to do that consistently for 5 years. You have to be teaching, you have to get good, like course evaluations, you have to be consistently doing research and publishing and contributing to the field. They also have what's called like service to the field and service to the university, so serving on governing boards, serving on editorial boards for journals, and it's it's a very rigorous process when you're tenured track. And then you go up for review on usually I think your 6th year, and you can be, if the university approves you as a tenure faculty, then you become sort of the traditional, what we think of as the faculty. They still kind of doing this 2-2 sort of load typically, where they still have to write, they still have to publish, and they only teach usually a couple classes a semester. But when you're tenure, you're kind of untouchable. It takes a massive act
egregious to get fired.
To get fired, usually it's in very, very, very specific circumstances that are. Basically, you get to do what you want, teach what you want, research what you want.
You're more likely, interestingly enough, when my professor told me, you're more likely to get fired, if you're a tenure track, to get fired over misuse of funds than over sexual assault.
Yeah. The number one thing that gets tenured faculty let go is the university is broken out of money and they have to make budget cuts. It's about the only thing that a university can surefire let go of a tenured faculty without it ending up in court, is if it's just budget cuts to the department. And even then, it's kind of a whole thing.
So we're addressing different types of faculty because sometimes there are different ways of approaching them. Some may have been administrators for like 20 years, and now they're teaching in your program. So they might not have the same type of experience as someone else might have. Someone might be trained in very much philosophical thought, whatever.
May not be as engaged with the research while being very engaged with their field.
And when we say with the research in the field, we're kind of drawing a distinction. We're talking about research in the field. So let's say you study college students, right? You could be doing different types of studies on them, reading different types of studies, as opposed to being an administrator and having worked with college students. It's a different set of knowledge that you're bringing to the table. But so, which kind of leads me to the next question. Almi's saying, can we speak more about intelligence? In our program, especially we hear a lot of, oh, this person's really smart, this person's really smart, this person is not. I'm saying it the nice way. And by the way, I don't really like this wine. I prefer the other one.
Yeah, the Malbec was
better. The Malbec was better. I usually get a different type of Apothic red.
That's fair.
So, but yeah, I'm still learning. All right, so what do we mean by...
As a parenthetical, one day for these, your Woke Wednesday should just be like wine reviews. I don't know if that's...
Oh, that could work too. A wokeness around wine is...
volunteer my...
your expertise.
Expertise is a very loose and fast term, but
your experience.
Lots of experience. Anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
So what do we mean by intelligence? Because it seems like we tend to privilege a certain type of intelligence over another.
And I think this is true in a lot of fields. It really comes down to, if you've read a lot, if you know a lot of really big words, we call you smart. We call you intelligent. And, I mean, there's a little bit that's going on there. Someone who is really well read in the field, meaning that they read the latest articles, they read the latest books, literature, etc., is usually, speaking very generally, someone who is probably going to be able to speak more intelligently about issues because they have educated themselves. That's sort of the whole thing. Versus there are some smart, it's kind of the practical smarts, the common sense smarts, or even the and this is true in office, not just in higher ed, but in office. They have the practitioner smarts, which is maybe they don't know what the latest literature says, but they know how to actually get shit done in their field. Which is a very different kind of smart and a very different kind of intelligent, and I wouldn't even want to privilege one over the other, but if you're looking for one and you're getting the other, then that person's not going to seem very smart to you. They might be book smart, but they can't actually to you, it doesn't seem like they actually know how the field works in practice.
Yeah, and I think also intelligence is very contextual, kind of like what Justin's saying, and relative to a situation and to a certain person. To me, it also implies a type of criticality.
That's
true. If you ever get a chance, please read this. Dr. Burns actually recommended this one. He recommended for you. Anti-intellectualism in America. There you go.
Boom.
It really draws a distinction between intelligence and intellect. Whereas intelligence might be something that's more rote, book smart, something that you can just kind of regurgitate. Intellect is a type of criticality that you bring. So please feel free to look into this book. A really amazing book, Richard Hofstadter. I can also send you all an article on Richard Hofstadter so you can kind of look at his work. If you're interested, I have like a short 10-pager. It's funny. Someone told me recently that 10 pages is a lot for a scholarly journal, and I'm like, or article. I was like, I wish. That's a short one.
10 pages is the thing fired out the week before it's due.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, that's kind of a look into intelligence and intellect. I think different people have different definitions of it. But
the one, just to pull it back, the one final point I would add on that is, and we were speaking about this in one of our classes. We were talking about it in terms of students, but I think it's true in faculty too. We were talking about this concept of the educability of someone. And educability coming to, it's not I can learn calculus. It's more speaking to I have this way of thinking, but if somebody presents something to me, I am willing to sort of acknowledge it, change my viewpoint maybe, or, at least acknowledge the veracity of what I'm dealing with. And that's something you can get into, I think, with faculty particularly, is because we put them at the front of the classroom as the expert, quote unquote. And I think that puts you in a position where if you're a faculty, you sort of feel like I'm the expert. I'm the one who's supposed to know the thing. And so to have someone maybe challenge you on something, some faculty will be very resistant to.
Yeah.
For a variety of different reasons that I don't even think are entirely even their fault. Sometimes it's just their fault, they're just stubborn. But there's something to be said for, if you want to talk about intelligence in the faculty, sometimes I find the most intelligent faculty are the ones who will be like, that's a really good point, I didn't really think about that. Versus the faculty who's just like, nah, that's not, no, you just haven't read enough, go read some more, then you'll know as much as I do. Which is problematic, but...
So let me ask you this. Oftentimes, students are asked to think critically. They put this in syllabi, right? Think critically. In this class, we expect you to think critically.
Yes.
Like, what the hell does that mean? And...
Isn't that the question of the
day? It kind of gets at your point a little bit, right? And in our program especially, and notice that I'm saying our program. Justin is in a master's program, but he's also taking doc level courses. And I'm going to ask you about what that's like in a bit. We are very much encouraged to challenge our professors.
Yes.
Which
I would say is rare. It's good. I think it's a very good, and this is one of the things I would say is the strongest thing about our program, particularly the doctoral faculty, is that we're encouraged to do that. That is, just as a note, pretty rare generally, but where that comes in and where that's important is, so in any class, and I mean you get this in your intro level, whatever class, you get a book or you get an article, you get text something, and they say, read the first couple chapters and we'll discuss them next week. And what always seems to happen is everyone reads it, and then you come to class and we do a summary of what it said, and then ostensibly you have a discussion around it. What really ends up happening is, I thought this point that they made on page 76 was really good. Yeah, and this thing they said about helping people, that just really resonated with me. And that's not critical thinking at all. We can probably debate all night, just critical thinking, but at least for me, in this context, there we go. But for me, this is getting to... And it's not just disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing, because to me that's just stupid. But
or questioning just for
just
being annoying.
What are the assumptions that they're making here? Or, this is coming from one perspective. I don't think it's because everything's usually just coming from a perspective, and texts take a lot of things for granted. Papers take a lot of things for granted, and critical thinking gets into when you question the assumptions behind a piece of writing. And I'm not sure about this. Maybe I agree with the general thrust. So especially in our master's program, you read a lot of stuff about developing students, usually around like identity development or something like that. And everyone that's unfair. A lot of people in my classes, in my experience, would just say, all of this is wonderful, this is great. And at one point I was in class and I was reading a book and I was just like, I feel like this person's kind of full of shit. Like it's not that the idea of helping people develop I disagree with, it's just the way that this person is understanding it I disagree with, because I understand these issues in these different kinds of ways. And sometimes I think people are afraid of we agree maybe on the central point, but we disagree on maybe certain understandings about it, and that doesn't mean that one of us is right or wrong. There very rarely in these discussions is there a right or wrong. It is, I'm understanding it from this perspective, you're understanding it from that perspective, and then we sort of maybe find a place to meet in the middle. And all the time, I mean, you see it with some of our best faculty, there are things they just flat out disagree on, and they're very smart, to go back to that, but they just disagree. And that's fine.
I've gotten into it. I'm not one to back down from an argument, and I will go at it with my professors. But I think it's made me sharper, more, also more empathetic to listening.
Yeah.
Because I think listening is key as a student.
Yes.
And for professors too. So that's something that I think is, to all your points, your great points, that I think is extremely important.
And the faculty that won't listen, those are where you're going to run into problematic faculty too.
Yeah, and I think one thing too you're in a higher education administration program.
Yes.
Right? Not every program is created equally.
No.
So other programs might be different, like at UPenn, or University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League school, where they have this program. Students might be getting taught a different way.
Yep.
So do you feel like you missed out on a different program by being here? Because that's something I think that grad school students might think about.
Yeah, this is sort of this is the challenging thing when you're looking at schools. I can see what the program puts on its university website. I can even talk to a faculty member that's there, but how do you really know the type of educational experience you're going to get once you're there?
Yeah.
You can look at like the names of schools and make judgments based on that, and there's a little bit of validity in that, but to make that judgment from the outside on the type of experience you're going to get at a school and if it's actually going to be the right, man, that's just so hard. Like it's really difficult. And people in this field will tell you, well, just look at the faculty, look at what they write about, look at what they publish, talk to some students. And that's really, I get frustrated by that advice because it only really goes so far. But so when you're talking about it's kind of the grass is always green on the other side. So yeah, I got into our master's program, and our master's program is really good at what it's trying to do. So what it's trying to do, in my estimation, and this is even talking to some of our faculty on this, even faculty that we generally kind of like and respect, what it's trying to do is develop practitioners, and it's preparing you to go get that first job. My estimation is it's really good, yes, in student affairs. So like a campus life, campus
hall
director, great at getting res life positions, something
entry level administrative position in a university.
It's really good at getting you the job. I don't know how well it prepares you for that job. I don't know how well it prepares you for future jobs, but it's really good at getting you the first job. And that's what it is. That's what it's good at.
Real quick, is that also why it's important to have an assistantship?
Yes. Well, yes and no. If you're going into education and higher education, you almost have to have an assistantship. I mean, you don't, but man, it makes everything so much easier. Yeah. But not to totally privilege our field, because other fields, having job experience at a university, I don't know how much is going to help you get, some engineering job or something like that.
Unless you had a GA position
in the engineering department. Yeah, usually there you're probably wanting to get more of like a teaching assistantship, something like that. So that's the one thing I would offer. If you're going to do not higher education, which is most of the fields, teaching assistantship is the way to go. But that aside, for our field, yes, because you're getting experience in the field that you're wanting to go into. Yeah. And that's sort of where the value comes in. But, sorry, come on.
Yeah. I forgot. So Instagram kicks us off after an hour. It'll kick us off in like 5 minutes. So I wanted to end it real quick and restart it. And then so we kind of get into the other part that I want to kind of get into. All right.
Absolutely.
All right, cool.